I wonder if you can just give a very brief recap for our listeners, because I think we've talked about it before on the show. This sort of weird mystical boogeyman of federal guidance letters. What is that? What does it mean in practice? And why is it a problem that needs addressing?
Yeah. So let me just say at the outset that we're so grateful for Jennifer and her colleagues at Center for Practical Federalism, because that audit has really helped us to know ways that we could make some needed protections, and I think Utah's trying to be responsive. So federal guidance is, so if you imagine Congress passes a law and we think, okay, that's the law, that governs all of us. But Congress, for all kinds of reasons, will want to will leave some things that either they intend for federal administrative bureaucratic agencies to regulate, or the agencies may, even without really that being Congress's intention, take on that themselves. They can go through a process of creating formal rules that are theoretically binding, legally binding on those that are being regulated by the agency, and they often do this. They send out guidance letters, and what the guidance letter looks like in theory is a communication from a federal agency to a state agency or to someone else that they're regulating in the private sector that says, we understand the law to require this thing. And like Jennifer pointed out, if you it may sound like, oh, guidance is just a way of showing us how to do things, but in reality, the letter you're getting is from someone who has the ability to make your life much harder if you don't play along. And so the incentive structure is for agents, for state agencies, for individuals who are being regulated to go along with that guidance and treat it as if it were the law, even though it really is not intended to be. So that's the issue we've been working on, to make it a little more transparent and push back in some cases on the kind of guidance, at least in Utah, that our agencies have received.
Can you talk about those efforts to push back on a little bit? Because I'm not an attorney, I'm not a constitutional law expert the way you are, Bill. But in my mind, when I think of this kind of thing, I think, well, okay, you have Congress makes the law, the executive branch implements or implements the law. Same thing at the state level. Our state legislature passes laws. The the executive branch puts them into practice. And it seems like that should be it. That, okay, whether or not something is illegal or not allowed to do, or you're going to be penalized for, shouldn't that be something that's decided by the legislative branch? Seems like you're saying, well, that's actually not the case in many respects.
Yeah, the aspiration is correct. That should be something that the legislative branch, that our elected officials ought to do. But in this case, because of the rulemaking authority that Congress has given to agencies, they are able to make some rules, and then in addition, they've taken advantage of this guidance process to make de facto rules, even if they're not really legally binding. And so what we've been trying to do in Utah is to, first of all, just get some transparency. It may be surprising for some people to know that as far as we know, no state has ever asked that all of the guidance sent by the federal government to state agencies be made publicly available. Some have done it in one particular area of the law, but our state law now requires that every guidance letter received by agencies has to be made publicly available. And we're working on a report to the State's Federalism Commission that looks at the guidance we've received since that law went into effect. And I believe this will be the first time any state has had a presentation like this, where state lawmakers now will become aware of the sort of full scope of what, even in just a couple of months, the federal government has been sending a flurry of letters to all kinds of different agencies in Utah and telling them, you need to do this, you need to do that, stop doing this, start doing this. That we'll finally get a picture of that. And of course, that doesn't touch all the other things that have come before, but this is at least a start in creating some of that transparency. The next step will be figuring out how much exactly that imposes costs on the state. If they go along with all of that guidance, do they have to hire full-time employees? Do they have to change processes that create impositions on Utah taxpayer money? The answer, of course, is yes, it does have that effect, but we'll try and quantify that too.
It's amazing progress. And Christine, hearing Bill kind of outline that, it sounds like step one, we just have to be aware that this is happening, that transparency piece, where if we can just know what kinds of guidance, unofficial directives are coming down from these federal agencies, then the next step is we have to act on it. And I'm curious, have you seen in the world of education policy, maybe broadly speaking, trying to think about, well, how do we act as a state to try and reclaim some of that control over, in this case, education policy within the borders of Utah? What do you think are maybe the best opportunities to start doing that here?
Now, this question is really relevant in the education space because most people understand education to be a state issue, and it's been a topic of grievance for many years about how much pressure the federal government can put on state education agencies. And I've written about this in the recent months about what happens if we reduce the federal footprint or intervention. What do the states do? And I think first, it's really the states need to have aspirational goals and a state vision first. That's independent of like a national or federal vision of what education needs to be. States they have challenges in reading scores, and that is national, but every state's sort of dealing with that, or chronic absenteeism. What is the state vision for wanting to deal with those and have a roadmap that they can follow regardless? When it comes to existing federal structures, the current administration has put out some letters letting states know, hey, in certain federal funding, are some flexibility that states can take advantage of in Title I and even IDEA. So they're trying to kind of push states in that direction. And then I think states really can also be champions of more flexibility in federal funding. There's been discussions about whether or not the two main funding streams, so that would be ESSA and IDEA, could they become block grants? So then states would need to be prepared to be innovative and say, how could we take that and make them even more, maybe micro grants, make them, work for individual students. So I really think, though, it starts with states understanding what they want to do and what they want to accomplish, because it really is their domain, and they should act like that.
Jennifer, to round out this segment, I want to ask you if you were talking to state policymakers, either governors or legislators, and you're sort of kind of giving them advice in terms of how to have federalism, maybe in terms of, hey, if you rank lower on the federalism scorecard, here's what you can do to kind of boost your rankings. I'm curious what you would say to state leaders when it comes to, hey, here's what you should be doing to increase this practice and constitutional principle of federalism when it comes to how you govern in your states, whether it's in the issue areas that Bill and Christine mentioned or something else. What's like the one thing that you think, man, this is what state leaders should be focused on?
Yeah, I think, well, do what Utah does is probably an easy answer, but
We like
I
that
think
answer.
at the minimum, you need to know what your dependency is. If you really are looking after the best welfare of your state. And so that's knowing exactly how much money is coming in from the federal government, what programs depend on federal money, and then developing a contingency plan for not if, but we know when that money dries up. That's step one. Step two, the grad school level, right, is addressing some of these things like guidance that you all are doing, and addressing some of the other things that we put in the scorecard.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.